She spoke for simple words, and they shattered everything between us. I never saw it coming, how something so simple could tear my life apart. It was just after 9 at night when my phone buzzed. My heart sank as soon as her name flashed on the screen. For a split second, I thought about ignoring it, but habit kicked in and I swiped to answer. "Yeah," I said, bracing myself. "You're a piece of trash." Her voice was sharp, dripping with venom. "Wow, what a warm greeting," I muttered sarcastically. "Miss me already? You useless psycho jerk." Sarah's voice was shaking with anger. "What were you thinking, doing that in front of Tommy Jr. and Emily? It's bad enough you act like this with me, but they're kids. Do you even care what this does to them? What's wrong with you? Can you calm down for a second?" I replied, trying to keep my frustration under control. "You're gonna blow up if you keep this up." "You're disgusting," she spat. "You've got no respect. What are the kids supposed to think of you now? Let me guess. This is about the ring, isn't it?" I glanced at my bare finger. "Of course it is. You lose it over something I said, calling me names, and then the second I go to my parents, you pack up and disappear. And as a final touch, you leave your wedding ring out for everyone to see, like it's some kind of statement. How could you pull something like that? Did you even read the note I left? Or are you too busy freaking out?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. She let out a high-pitched, ear-splitting shriek. "You coward! I don't even recognize you anymore." "Well, that makes two of us," I replied coolly. "But seriously, did you even bother to read the note? You think this is a joke? You're trying to make it look like I'm the one who wants out, like this whole mess is my fault," she snarled, her anger still seething. "I wasn't the one who disappeared without a word. I didn't drag the kids off to my parents' place for a weekend without saying anything. And I sure as heck wasn't the one caught making out with a friend in his car on the way home. No matter what ridiculous story you've cooked up." My jaw tightened as I listened to her string of denials. My patience was wearing thin. I already knew the truth. I'd seen the emails, followed her movements. I had all the proof, but throwing it out now wouldn't do me any good. I'd let her dig herself deeper. "I shouldn't have left without telling you," Sarah continued, her tone softening, trying a different approach. "I'm really sorry, Tom. I was so angry. I wasn't thinking. But that whole thing with the kiss? Your dad said you told him about it." "Tom, it never happened. Michael was just being nice, giving me a ride home. That's it. I never touched him, never kissed him." "It's all in that twisted mind of yours," she snapped. "What happened to you? I thought you were just paranoid before, but now you're scaring me. First, you lose it over something I said, then you accuse me of cheating, and now you're imagining things. You think you saw me kissing some young guy who wouldn't even dream of touching me. That's not normal, Tom. This is delusional behavior." I almost let Harrison slip, but I caught myself in time. "So, this Jake guy, how close are you two?" I asked, keeping my tone even. There was a long silence before she finally answered. "Jake's an assistant professor in the business department. He started about a year ago. I'm his mentor. It's part of my role as his faculty advisor. They pair the new hires with experienced professors. You know how it works. We've had lunch a few times, I dance with him at some events, but that's it. He's just a nice kid, Tom. I'm over 10 years older than him, for heaven's sake. And for the record, I never kissed him. Is he a good friend, though?" I pressed, not letting up. She let out a sigh, clearly irritated. "Tom, he's just a colleague. We talk sometimes, work on projects together. He's no more a friend to me than half the other male and female professors on campus. Are you really going to start fixating on Jake now? Is that where this is heading?" "Not if you're telling me he's just a casual friend," I replied calmly. "But then why were you dressed like that? Doesn't exactly scream professor, does it?" Another heavy silence followed. "Okay, fine," Sarah finally admitted. "That outfit was a bit revealing. But come on, Tom. I'm not 75 years old. I'm only 39. I'm still young, and that doesn't mean I want men gawking at me. I don't flirt, I don't cheat, but I'm not dead either. You've never worn anything like that to the events we've been to together." I pointed out, my tone sharper than intended. "Oh God, Tom, do we really have to do this now?" She groaned, sounding exhausted. "Why not?" I shot back. "Don't all those self-help books preach honesty in marriage? That couples should air out their issues? So if I'm being irrational or paranoid, If I'm obsessing for no reason, then what's the harm in answering a simple question? Why do you wear clothes like that and flaunt yourself when I'm not there? Can't we just talk about this when you get home? She pleaded, her voice softening. I'm not sure I'm coming home, I replied quietly. The silence that followed stretched on, thick and heavy. Why am I even trying to hold on to you? She burst out suddenly. You clearly don't care if we stay married or not. You don't notice when I dress up. You don't notice if I change my hair. Heck, you haven't taken me on a date or gotten me drunk in over 10 years. I wear these clothes for other men, Sarah admitted, her voice raw with frustration. Because I want to feel desirable again, to any man. Is that honest enough for you? For the first time in days, I felt like she was finally telling me the truth, and it hit me hard. What did that say about me as a husband? Suddenly, all the words I had ready to fire back seemed useless. I felt hollow. I'm sorry, Sarah, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry for everything. But I knew she didn't grasp the full meaning behind my apology. She had no idea I had dug through her emails and texts, discovering pieces of her life she had hidden from me. She didn't realize I was apologizing for so much more than just the argument at hand. I was sorry for letting myself grow old too soon, for letting the fire that once burned between us fade to embers. I was apologizing for investing more energy into my work than into our marriage, for letting her slip away, little by little, until she belonged more to someone else than to me. So, are you coming home? She asked, her voice hesitant and uncertain. I hesitated, the silence stretching as I considered. She was still more in love with another man than she was with me. How could I come back knowing that I would never be able to compete with Harrison for her heart, for her loyalty? No, Sarah, I don't think so, I said finally, the weight of my decision settling in. It's not because I'm angry with you. I think we need some space, some time apart. There was a long pause on the other end, the air between us heavy with unspoken words. Okay, Tom, she replied, her voice soft and resigned. But one day you're going to regret this, Sarah said, her voice cold and sharp. You'll hate yourself for what you're doing now. Maybe, I admitted. Give the kids a kiss for me. They're too old for that, she shot back, her tone full of contempt. But I guess you haven't noticed. And with that, she hung up, leaving me with the hollow sound of the dial tone. I switched off the TV and laid back on the bed, staring at the ceiling as thin moonlight crept through the balcony window. Sarah had a point. The regret was already creeping in, a slow burn that had started long before our fight. This wasn't just about what had happened in the last week. No, this had been coming for months, maybe even years. The marriage had been rotting beneath the surface. And if the emails I'd uncovered were any indication, the damage was far worse than I'd ever let myself believe. Monday arrived like it always did, dragging me back into my work. There was no time to wallow in my thoughts. My desk was piled with fresh cases that needed attention. No headline-grabbing trials, just the usual parade of human tragedy. First, there was the sailor from the Jacksonville Naval Base. In a rage over his crying infant daughter, he'd shaken her so violently, her skull started bleeding. Of course, the parents had deep pockets and were spending a fortune on some hotshot lawyer from New York to swoop in and show the locals a few big-city legal tricks. Then there were the brothers, drug dealers, who had sprayed bullets into a rival's home. In the chaos, an 8-year-old boy had thrown himself over his younger siblings, sacrificing his life. Just another day, sorting through the worst of humanity's brokenness. That child had died a hero, protecting his family. It wasn't an unusual week for me, by any means, just another in a long line of tragic stories. But the grind of the legal system never stopped. There were motions to file, jury selections to handle, and witnesses to prepare. As always, the days seemed to drag on endlessly, while the nights vanished in the blink of an eye. I wasn't one for courtroom theatrics. My role was to keep the gears of justice turning smoothly behind the scenes, to ensure everything ran like clockwork. One afternoon, amid the chaos, my assistant Laura tracked me down in my office. I heard you're staying at that place on the river, she said, her tone shifting from casual to serious. You moved out and left Sarah and the kids. What's going on, Tom? I let out a heavy sigh, feeling the weight of her concern. It's complicated, Laura. Too much to dive into right now. There's no formal separation or anything like that. I just needed some space, a chance for both of us to breathe. Laura's eyes narrowed, her concern deepening. You know how often time apart turns into a permanent split. Don't do this, Tom. I don't know what you're thinking, but you can't just walk away from your marriage without putting up a fight. You're like a bulldog in the courtroom. I've never seen you back down from anything. Don't let her go without a struggle. There can't be a marriage without two people willing to stay in it. I replied flatly, the truth of my words hanging heavily in the air. And that's all there is to it, I said, my tone dismissive. Now, open the door and get out of here. As jury selection began for the upcoming trials, I took a break for 90 minutes and drove home at noon, knowing the house would be empty. Once inside, I logged onto Sarah's computer, my heart racing as I scanned through her recent emails. My stomach twisted in knots as I read the latest exchanges between Sarah and Harrison. Harrison, wow, that doesn't sound like the husband you described to me. At least you should feel more relaxed today. Funny, but you didn't seem all that relaxed tonight. Did he make you rethink staying with him? It seems like he's really trying to change. I'm honestly a little selfishly sorry to hear that, but you have to give the guy some credit. He's making an effort. Sarah, I know Harrison. I know. But Harrison what? Sarah, oh no. Harrison, I don't even know how to say this. Not even to you. But I think Sunday night convinced me that this isn't going to work out. Harrison, he may be late, but it looks like his heart is in the right place. Sarah, that says it all. His heart is in the right place. Harrison, so have you decided what you're going to do yet? Each message felt like a dagger to my heart, and I sat back in disbelief, the reality of our crumbling marriage crashing down around me. So, are you going to mention the awards ceremony at UNF on Friday night? Sarah, I haven't made up my mind yet, but it won't be anytime soon. No, I'm not going to tell him about the awards dinner. I'll just say it's a work thing and that spouses aren't really encouraged to attend. But I need you there. I don't want to be recognized as one of the two best new young faculty members without my best friend by my side. Harrison, you know I want you there. This year wouldn't have been nearly as enjoyable without you as my friend and mentor. Sarah, don't use that word mentor. It makes me sound so old. You don't think I'm old, do you? No, definitely not. You have more youthful energy than most of the female students here, and you certainly don't look like a mentor. That's the sweetest thing you've ever said to me. Now stop it. I'm already struggling to keep my composure as it is. I need to wrap things up with Tom before we start having conversations like this. I understand. I won't pressure you until things are settled at home, but I just have to say I can't wait until Friday. Be a good boy. I will, but it's not easy. I know. You forgot. I saw you trying to get up that day at the restaurant. It's really, really hard. Bye. Each line I read felt like a fresh blow, leaving me reeling. Everything I had been suspecting for so long was laid out in front of me, undeniable. The relationship between them wasn't just professional. It was personal, intimate in a way that stung more than I could put into words. My marriage wasn't just strained. It was over, even if neither of us had said it aloud yet. I stared at the screen, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. There it was, laid out in black and white. Sarah had crossed the line from a friend to almost a lover with this man. She was planning to deceive me about Friday night. Also, she could be with him on his special day. And after that, she'd leave me for good. I shouldn't have been shocked. I'd sensed this coming for a while. But seeing it spelled out so clearly felt like a knife twisting in my heart. I barely made it to the bathroom before I violently emptied my stomach, the contents splattering into the toilet. After cleaning myself up, I erased every trace of those emails and stepped out of the house. As I drove away, a grim certainty washed over me. I would never return. The doubts and hesitations that had plagued me were gone. My marriage was over. The wedding ring on my finger suddenly felt like it was searing into my skin, yet I left it on. The symbolism had lost all meaning. There was no marriage left to dissolve. I felt ancient, like a dead man walking through life. Yet outside, the sun continued to shine brightly. I could hear children laughing and playing nearby, their joy a stark contrast to my despair. The world kept turning, blissfully unaware of my personal tragedy. That night, I left a message saying I'd be working late and staying at the river apartment for the next few days. No one called me back. Friday arrived, dull and anticlimactic, just like it often did in the middle of a trial. Judges like to wrap things up early so they could kick off their weekends. By 6:15 p.m., I was pulling into my driveway, having sped home while breaking several traffic laws to get there quickly. As I stepped inside, I saw Tommy Jr. heading out to a friend's car. Emily brushed past me with a slightly embarrassed smile. I couldn't help but wonder if she was aware of her mother's friendship with the young professor. From her expression, it seemed like Emily felt more awkward about my presence than about her mother's actions. Sarah was descending the stairs just as I entered, looking stunning in an elegant black dress. Her eyes widened in surprise, and I caught a flicker of fear in her gaze. "Oh, Tom, I thought you'd be home later," she said, her voice slightly shaky. "You know I usually get back early on Fridays unless there's a verdict," I replied, keeping my tone even. "Where are you off to all dressed up?" "Oh, there's an event. It's kind of mandatory for university employees," she said quickly, almost too quickly. I just felt like dressing up. "But it's a business thing. I don't think any spouses will be there. Look, you've been working hard all week. I didn't think you'd want to spend the evening listening to speeches about university administration." Her words hung in the air, flimsy and full of excuses. I stood there, watching her, knowing she was on her way to meet him. "Why don't you kick back, order a pizza, and we can make plans for the weekend when I get home?" "I'll try not to be too late," Sarah suggested, her voice light but tense. I felt an urge to insist on going with her, just to see how she'd squirm under the pressure, but I decided to let it go for now. "Okay, babe, you really do look incredible. Every guy there is going to love it," I said, watching her closely for any reaction. "But go ahead and do what you need to do. Don't stress about getting back early. I know how these events can drag on. Stay out as late as you want. I'll probably hit the sack early tonight. We can sort things out tomorrow." Sarah smiled with what seemed like relief and gave me a quick peck on the cheek. She started to say something else, but stopped herself, glancing back at me one last time before hurrying out the door. "Goodbye," I said softly as the door clicked shut behind her. I followed at a discreet distance, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as her car headed toward the UNF campus. It wasn't long before she pulled up to the UNF arena, a massive structure that hosted graduations, basketball games, and events like the one she was attending tonight. Flashing my prosecutor's ID to the campus police officer, I parked in a secluded lot across the street. For what was supposed to be a mundane work event, there were quite a few people dressed in formal attire streaming into the building. Even though I didn't have an invitation, a quick flash of my ID and a casual mention of being Professor Anderson's husband got me past the entrance. Inside, I took in the sight of a podium set up at the far end of the hall, surrounded by tables neatly arranged around the perimeter. A cash bar was bustling near the entrance, but instead of heading there, I made my way to the stadium seating area, climbing to the top row to observe unnoticed. From this vantage point, I had a sweeping view of the entire crowd below. It took me about 10 minutes of scanning the room through my small binoculars before I finally spotted Sarah. She was seated at a table near the dais with 5 others, 3 men and 2 women. My heart clenched when I saw Jake Harrison, tall and lean in his tuxedo, with his arm draped casually over the back of Sarah's chair. He leaned in, whispering something in her ear that made her smile. I shifted my focus to the others at the table. The knowing looks they exchanged told me everything I needed to know. Sarah and Harrison were clearly being perceived as an established couple. A wave of nausea hit me as I recalled the few occasions I'd attended university functions with Sarah recently. No wonder I had drawn those looks of pity. Everyone else had known the truth, while I remained oblivious. From my seat high above, I watched as Sarah and Harrison shared laughter, exchanged private jokes, and indulged in those small, affectionate touches that only come with new love. At one point, they even fed each other bites of food, their fingers briefly interlocking. Jesus Christ, I muttered under my breath. Could they be any more blatant? The affair itself was enraging enough, but the fact that they flaunted it so openly infuriated me just as much. If Sarah was going to betray me, the least she could do was keep it discreet. Instead, I had become a joke, gossip fodder. every time I accompanied her, blissfully unaware of what was really going on. Eventually, the dinner transitioned into speeches. I clenched my jaw when Mike Harrison was called to the stage to receive an award for being one of the 2 outstanding new teachers of the year. With a wave, he invited Sarah to join him. Despite her half-hearted protests, she let herself be drawn up onto the stage. As she stood there, a blush creeping across her cheeks, Harrison effusively thanked her for her mentorship and support, praising her youthful energy and vibrant spirit. Then, to my utter shock, Harrison tilted Sarah's chin upward and kissed her full on the lips, right there in front of the entire audience. A loud cheer erupted from the crowd. I could barely breathe, frozen in disbelief, my heart hammering in my chest as the room spun around me. It felt like a scene plucked straight from a romantic comedy, the kind where the hero boldly claims his one true love. Sarah leaned into Harrison, kissing him back before reluctantly pulling away, her cheeks flushed. In that moment, she didn't resemble the devoted mother of 2 teenagers I once knew. The awards ceremony dragged on for another 45 minutes, and afterward, the announcer cheerfully invited everyone to enjoy drinks and dancing. As the tables were cleared away for a makeshift dance floor, I noticed that Sarah and Harrison were among the first couples to sway to the music. They did make a striking pair, I had to admit, and judging by the envious looks from the other couples, I wasn't the only one who noticed. My mind raced with bitter thoughts. What had Sarah told her colleagues about our marriage? Had she claimed we had some kind of open relationship? Or maybe that I was perfectly fine with her seeing someone else? Perhaps she'd even told them that I wouldn't be in the picture for much longer. Taking a deep breath, I stood up. It was time to end this sordid charade. I navigated my way down to the main floor, moving through the crowd of dancers. In my dark suit, without a tie, I stood out in the sea of tuxedos and evening gowns. As I walked, I caught snippets of whispered conversations. It was clear that people had noticed me, though they weren't sure what was about to unfold. And then there they were, Sarah and Harrison, lost in each other's gaze, completely oblivious to my approach until I spoke. "Congratulations, Professor," I said loudly, cutting through the soft murmur of the room, "on your award and for managing to steal my wife all in one night." Sarah and Harrison jerked apart like they'd been electrocuted. Sarah's eyes widened in shock, and Harrison's mouth opened and closed, completely caught off guard, his gaze bouncing between us. "Tom," Sarah finally managed to say, her voice strained and trembling. What are you doing here?" Her surprise quickly morphed into anger. "Why, Tom? I told you spouses weren't invited tonight. Why didn't you listen to me? Why couldn't you just stay at home?" I let out a bitter laugh. "And miss all this? How often does a husband get the privilege of watching his wife kiss and flirt with another man in front of hundreds of people? You sure know how to put on a show. And you're not hiding anything. Well, except from me, of course." Harrison, clearly trying to regain some control, stepped between us and raised his hand as if to calm me down. "Mr. Anderson, I'm sorry we're meeting like this," he said, his voice forced but steady. "But Sarah is here tonight as my mentor, and I hope you understand that." I smirked, feeling the betrayal solidify into a cold, simmering rage. "Oh, I'm sure she's taught you plenty, Jake. You seem like a fast learner." Sarah grabbed my arm, her voice low and urgent. "Tom, don't do this. Not here, not now, not in front of everyone I work with. So it's fine for you to kiss him and act like his girlfriend in front of the same people who know you're married." I shot back, my anger rising with every word. "You're talking nonsense again, Tom," Sarah snapped, her frustration evident. Nothing like that happened. I could see some of the men nearby edging closer, watching the scene unfold. Their eyes flicked between the 3 of us, drawn in by the escalating tension. I knew this would fuel gossip in her workplace for weeks. A part of me wanted to walk away, to keep whatever dignity I had left, but another part of me wasn't ready to let it go. "You liar," I said, my voice low and icy. "I've been watching you all night. I saw you feeding him like he's your lover. I saw him kiss you, and you kissed him back." Harrison clenched his fists, stepping closer to me, clearly trying to take control of the situation. "Look, I understand you're upset, but you have no right to. That's Mr. Anderson to you." I cut him off, my tone sharp and unyielding. And I have every right. In case you've forgotten, she's my wife. Maybe not for much longer, but until she tells me otherwise, I'm still the man she's supposed to kiss and love, not you. Harrison stopped in his tracks, his composure faltering as Sarah's face flushed scarlet, sensing the growing attention of the crowd around us. Whispers began to swirl, people shifting closer to see what was unfolding. By the way, you teach business, right? I continued, keeping my tone calm, almost casual. Do you cover business ethics? What are the ethics of pursuing a married woman, of breaking up a family? Maybe not a happy one, but still a family. I watched as Harrison struggled to keep his cool, his fists clenching at his sides, muscles tense. Tom, Sarah tried to interject, her voice strained. Mr. Anderson, I know how this looks, Harrison interrupted, his voice steady but clearly under pressure. We've grown close over the past 9 months, but I would never cross that line with a married woman. I felt a cold smirk pull at my lips, the contempt in my chest boiling over. Jake, let's cut the crap. You do realize what I do for a living, right? I read people, body language, facial expressions, the whole deal. You're either in love with my wife, or at least in lust. And guess what? She's more into you than you are into her. The tension in the air was palpable. Something inside me snapped at that moment. Maybe it was weeks of pent-up anger, or maybe it was the sheer injustice of the whole thing. Without thinking, my right fist shot out toward Harrison's face. To my surprise, he easily leaned back, dodging the punch with a quickness that only fueled my rage. In an instant, he retaliated, his fist connecting solidly with the side of my head, sending me stumbling backward. The crowd gasped, a few people stepping forward, sensing that things were quickly spiraling out of control. I found myself flat on my back, staring up at a sea of horrified and amused faces. The air was thick with whispers. Above me, Sarah stood, not with concern, but with anger radiating from her eyes. As I tried to shake the dizziness from my head, I heard Harrison's voice. I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't mean to hit him, but when he swung, I just reacted. You know how it is. I pushed myself up, shrugging off a hand that reached out to help me. All right, you bastard. Let's do this again. I growled, lunging awkwardly at Harrison, my fists flying wildly. Harrison dodged effortlessly, deflecting my punches before shoving me back again, sending me crashing face first onto the floor. A snicker rippled through the crowd. Look, Harrison said, his voice steady. We don't have to do this. Let's be adults. I scrambled to my feet, the room spinning as I stood. Sarah shook her head, her face a mask of disgust and embarrassment. Please, Tom, stop this. You're making a scene. I have to work with these people every day. I haven't even started yet, my faithful and loving wife. I spat, dripping with sarcasm. More laughter erupted from the onlookers. Sarah's eyes flashed with disbelief. She stared at me as if she couldn't fathom that I might actually want to confront her precious, young stallion. That conviction, that I was harmless, cut deeper than any punch. Just go away, Tom, Sarah said coldly, her words slicing through the air like a knife. You're making a fool of yourself, someone in the crowd shouted. He's younger, bigger, and clearly knows how to fight. You've already embarrassed yourself. Don't make it worse. I glared at the speaker, feeling my frustration reach a boiling point. Your concern is touching, I sneered. Go to hell. A firm grip locked onto my elbow. Come on, Tom. It's over. Let it go, Harrison said calmly. Let me help you up, and we can get you cleaned up. Something primal ignited inside me at his words. I wasn't thinking anymore. I acted purely on instinct, lunging forward and driving the top of my head into Harrison's midsection. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and we both tumbled to the ground. I found myself on top of him, raining down a series of wild punches, not caring where they landed. The sound of Sarah's screams faded into the background as I focused entirely on Harrison beneath me. Adrenaline surged through my veins, drowning out everything else, until several pairs of hands suddenly grabbed me, pinning me to the floor. In the chaos, I caught sight of Sarah rushing to Harrison's side, kneeling beside him with tears streaming down her face. The reality of her choice hit me like another punch to the gut. In for a penny, in for a pound, I thought bitterly, as I let my body go limp in the arms of the men restraining me. "Call the police," someone shouted. "Security's here. Get this guy out of here," another voice barked angrily. As I lay there, surrounded by tuxedos and harsh glares, the full weight of what had just happened settled over me like a dark cloud. Everything I had left, every shred of dignity and pride, had been shattered in that one terrible moment. A tall, gray-haired man in an expensive suit rushed to help Harrison to his feet, concern etched across his face. "Professor Turner, are you all right? Should we call an ambulance?" He then turned to glare at me, his expression full of disdain. "And you, sir, whoever you are, will regret the day you attacked one of our faculty members." I raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "You must be President Harris, right?" Harris paused, clearly thrown off by my calm demeanor. "Yes, I'm the president of UNF. And you are?" "William Anderson, Senior Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Florida and husband of the blonde comforting your Professor Turner," I replied, keeping my voice steady. Harris's eyes widened as he looked between Sarah, Harrison, and me, the wheels visibly turning in his mind as he processed the situation. "In that case, Mr. Anderson," he said cautiously, "I wouldn't want to be in your shoes right now. You're an officer of the court who just assaulted a man in full view of hundreds of witnesses. That's not a good look, but perhaps we could show some leniency. I think," I interrupted, my voice low and controlled, "that your ass and the ass of this institution are about to become grass. And I'm going to be the lawnmower." Harris's expression tightened, his composure visibly faltering. It was clear he wasn't accustomed to being challenged so directly. "I don't understand," I continued, my tone calm but insistent. "Why don't we step aside somewhere private? I can explain it all to you, before you and this institution step into something far worse." Harris bristled at my tone, but seemed to recognize the sense in my words. He nodded curtly to the men holding me. "Bring him." They led me to a more secluded area near the restrooms, with Harris and Harrison flanking a still furious Sarah. When we were far enough from prying eyes and ears, Harris turned to me, arms crossed. "All right, Mr. Anderson. Explain yourself." Harrison had mostly stopped bleeding, but he was still wincing in pain as Sarah stood beside him, her arms wrapped protectively around him, glaring at me with pure hatred. "It's quite simple," I began, keeping my voice level. "My wife has been far too close to Professor Turner for some time, too close for my liking. Just the other day, he drove her home and kissed her in our driveway, while she was wearing a rather provocative outfit. Tonight, I've seen them behave in a very intimate manner both on and off the dance floor. And as you mentioned, we have hundreds of witnesses. I saw him kiss her in front of your staff, and I distinctly heard the applause when he did." Sarah's face turned a deeper shade of red, and she opened her mouth to protest, but I continued unwavering. "I think you understand the implications here. I'm not interested in petty revenge. I'm here to ensure this institution takes responsibility for allowing this behavior to go unchecked. I doubt I'll have much trouble convincing a jury when I sue UNF for alienation of affection. After all, her behavior appears to be common knowledge," I said coldly, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside me. Sarah's fury boiled over as she shot me a look of pure venom. "You bastard," she hissed, her eyes flashing with anger. "President Harris, my husband suffers from mental problems," she said, her voice rising with desperation. "He's become obsessed with the idea that I've been unfaithful. It's all in his head. There's absolutely nothing inappropriate between Jake and me. Please, just have him arrested." Harris studied her thoughtfully, his expression hard to read. "I would be inclined to agree with you, Professor Anderson. However, I was on the dais tonight and witnessed the two of you displaying affection, particularly that kiss. I got the distinct impression that no woman in her right mind would act like that unless she had an understanding with her husband. And it's clear you do not." He turned his gaze to Harrison, shaking his head. "As for you, Professor Turner, I must say I'm disappointed. I thought you were a promising addition to our faculty." Regardless of whether there was anything inappropriate between you and Professor Anderson, you should have exercised better judgment and avoided even the appearance of impropriety. Harrison's face paled, and for the first time that evening, he seemed genuinely unsettled. He looked like a man who had just realized how far out of his depth he was. Sarah, meanwhile, looked ready to explode, her carefully crafted narrative unraveling in front of her eyes. Harris wasn't done. This situation is not only embarrassing for the individuals involved, but for this institution as well. I'll be consulting with our legal team regarding the best course of action, and if necessary, we will be conducting an internal investigation to determine the full extent of what's transpired. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. And in the meantime, Professor Turner, I'd advise you to reconsider your position here. It might be in everyone's best interest. I watched in silence, a grim satisfaction settling over me as the gravity of the situation began to take hold. Whatever happened next, one thing was clear. The fallout from this night would be long-lasting, and for once, Sarah and her lover weren't the ones holding all the cards. And you clearly did not, Professor Anderson continued, his tone sharp, directing his words at Harrison. I will have to reconsider your future role at our university. I fought back a smirk, watching the stricken expressions on Sarah and Harrison's faces. Harris turned back to me, his demeanor shifting slightly. Regardless of our internal matters, Mr. Anderson, you find yourself in a much more precarious position. If we report this incident, you risk losing your position with the U.S. Attorney's Office, possibly even your law license. Why shouldn't I just call the police? True, I acknowledge, keeping my tone measured. I could face termination and disbarment. But if that happens, I'll sue the university for alienation of affection and for contributing to the destruction of my marriage. I might not win, probably won't, in fact, but I am a prominent prosecutor. My wife and Professor Turner are respected academics. And perhaps most importantly, my wife is blonde, and Turner has that classically handsome look. When word gets out about this love triangle, the alleged adultery, and whispers of impropriety in academia, UNF will be buried in unwanted media attention. Not the kind of press you want when trying to attract high-profile donors or corporate partners. I let the weight of my words hang in the air, watching as Harris processed the implications. For several long moments, the four of us stood in tense silence. A few campus security officers lingered nearby, waiting for instructions. Finally, Harris sighed heavily. You really don't care if you win the lawsuit, do you? Without waiting for my response, he continued. What do you want? Professor Turner is untenured, so he lacks the protections of seniority. Perhaps we could arrange for his departure. He paused, assessing the room. Your wife has more job security, but we could make it worthwhile for her to seek employment elsewhere. I watched as the shock washed over Sarah and Harrison. A grim satisfaction filled me, but I shook my head. I don't want revenge on either of them, I said, surprising even myself. I just want to get out of here and seek medical attention. Harris raised an eyebrow, clearly puzzled. You're an interesting man, Mr. Anderson. Why come here tonight and cause such chaos if you don't want retribution? I turned to Sarah, meeting her gaze. Her expression mirrored my surprise, and for the first time, I caught a flicker of something else, regret, maybe. Beside her, Harrison looked like a man whose world had crumbled beneath him. My marriage is over. I know that, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotional weight of my words. My wife doesn't love me anymore. It hurts, but it happens. I don't want to destroy her. We have 2 kids, and I want her to keep her job for their sake. I paused, taking a deep breath. I came here tonight because I wanted my wife to understand that I'm not a fool, that she can't just dress for a date and feed me some story about a dull academic meeting where spouses aren't invited. I turned my attention to Harrison. As for you, Professor Turner, I don't really blame you. You're a bastard for pursuing a married woman, sure, but I'd probably pursue my wife too if I weren't already married to her. She's an incredible woman. Harris studied me for a long moment, as if trying to gauge my sincerity. You're an interesting man, Mr. Anderson, he said finally. Please don't come back here again. With that, he turned and walked away, signaling the small crowd that had gathered to disperse. Sarah started to walk away with Harrison, but then she paused and turned back toward me. Her elegant dress was stained with blood, and the fire in her eyes had dimmed to something wearier, sadder. "Thanks, I guess," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "I still have my job, but I don't know how long I'll last after all this. It's all just in your mind, Tom. I'm not having an affair, and despite what you think you saw, Jake is just a friend." She took a breath, her expression shifting from sadness to steely resolve. "Listen, Tom, I don't want you coming back to the house tonight, or any other night. I'm serious. I'm filing for a restraining order to keep you away from me and the kids. I can't have you threatening us or acting out like you did tonight. This isn't just about you and me anymore. It's about their safety. We need space. I don't know what's going to happen to our marriage, but we can't keep doing this." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "You'll need to coordinate with the sheriff's office to collect your things." With that, she turned away and linked her arm with Harrison's, walking off together. I watched them disappear into the crowd, a crushing heaviness settling over me. The following week dragged on in a painful silence. No messages, no phone calls from Sarah or the kids. I hadn't reached out either, knowing any attempt would likely be met with hostility. The riverfront condo felt empty and sterile, a temporary shelter that only reminded me of everything I'd lost. The reality of it all was slowly sinking in. I was now truly alone. It was around noon on Friday when my phone rang unexpectedly. I glanced at the screen, startled to see Sarah's name flashing. "Hi, Sarah," I answered, tension creeping into my voice. "What's this about? Are you calling to tell me you've filed the restraining order against me?" "No, Tom," she replied, her voice taut with emotion. "Remember when we talked about taking some time apart to figure things out? Well, I'm filing for divorce this afternoon." My stomach dropped, but I fought to keep my tone steady. "I'm okay. Thanks for the heads up." "Tom, I haven't been happy for a long time," she continued, her voice unwavering. "I don't see a way out of this. And honestly, once things settle down, I don't think you'll miss me that much. You'll still have your job, your cases. That's what you live for, isn't it? It's been your whole world for so long." "Very insightful," I muttered, sarcasm creeping into my voice. "I'm glad to know you're thinking of me. By the way, how's Jake doing?" I added, the bitterness lacing my words. "Does he need a nose job?" "No, Tom, he didn't," she shot back, her frustration palpable. "And I know what you're thinking. It's the same old narrative ever since you lost it. But I'm not doing this for Jake. I'm doing it for myself. I just don't love you anymore. I don't." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, hollowing me out. "That's all you needed to say, Sarah?" I said quietly, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll find a lawyer and have him contact yours. Have a nice life." I hung up before she could respond, cutting off whatever words she might have used to soften the blow. For several moments, I just sat there, the silence around me echoing with the finality of it all. There was no nausea this time, just an eerie stillness, like the calm after a storm. Almost 20 years of shared memories, laughter, struggles, the small moments we built a life around, reduced to a single, abrupt phone call. It felt surreal, like I was watching the end of a long movie, the credits rolling while I sat frozen in place, unable to move. The life we'd built, the plans we'd made, everything gone in an instant.